So what does this latest reprieve mean for the company and for U.S.-China trade talks? Let's bring in Steve Pavlick. He's head of policy at Renaissance Macro Research and a former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs at the U.S. Treasury Department. Steve, thanks for joining us. I want to ask you, U.S. President Donald Trump likes to talk in terms of winners and losers. So you've got Huawei in China and the U.S. Who's who today?
I think it's probably, I would say Huawei's a winner here today. I think the fact that the reprieve has been extended for 90 days is good. I think that's good for the status of negotiations. I think it gives negotiators a little more runway here to potentially make some progress and maybe even extend things further beyond the 90 days. But I also think that the administration was very clear in adding other companies to the entity list that, if progress isn't made, that, things could get worse there, and see that as a point of leverage. Because again, they have their domestic audience they have to placate as well, similar to, China's President Xi Jinping.
From the U.S. Government side, what would be the consideration behind such an extension? I'm sort of thinking about this in layman's terms, but you said a 90-day deadline, and then on the 90th day, you say, let's start the clock over again.
I think with respect to the Huawei decision, the Trump administration knows that, Huawei is very strategically important to China, not only in its Made in 2025 aspirations, but also in the Belt and Road Initiative. And because of that, I think it's a very ripe target. And I think going ahead and extending it beyond this 90 days is hopefully a maneuver by or a message from the Trump administration that, we're not afraid to use this point of leverage here. And if you're willing to make a concession, we're willing to potentially negotiate with Huawei and offer, again, potential access for other companies for the U.S. side to help make sure that the company continues to do well.
Do you think this is really about security, or is this more what some are calling Trump's protectionism?
I think Trump sees it as a leverage point. I think there are some legitimate national security concerns from my time at the Treasury Department, from our briefings from the intelligence community. But I also think Trump, going back to what we were just talking about, knows how critical Huawei is to China's Made in 2025 aspirations and also its Belt and Road Initiative. So I think it's candidly both.
I want to understand, how can something be about security and also be used as leveraged? How can you leverage security?
I think there's a potential for Huawei to be a national security concerns if those if the proper protocols and standards aren't actually placed there to prohibit sensitive information from being potentially handed over to the Chinese government. I think if China can go ahead and make some assurances there that it won't do that, then the U.S. can proceed and actually have allow more U.S. companies to provide it with the technology there. And I think on the leverage side, again, Trump knows that Huawei is very critical to China's 5G aspirations, and I think using that as a point of leverage also helps with the broader trade discussion. So that's how I guess I kind of reconcile that, as seeing it as a little bit of both.
And I want to talk about those trade discussions. I've never led a trade war. I've never participated in one or in a trade deal. But how does Huawei fit into that trade war? I mean, as I understand it, it's quite rare for a private company to be given such a spotlight, a featured role in trade discussions.
What goes back to China really making that investment in 5G and really focusing most of the direct investment there into Huawei. And because of that, and because of the strategic importance that 5G is going to play, not only from a national security perspective, but also an economic perspective, I guess that's why I think that Huawei is probably one of those, or probably the unique company here that's been involved into the trade war. As things have kind of maybe stalled here on the tariff side, I think the Trump administration's been looking to what's another leverage point, and Huawei, because again, China's really invested so much in that one company, becomes a very ripe target.
And that investment is meant to be reaped with the benefits around the world. I'm curious, what type of impact do you think this has on Huawei, not just in terms of the U.S. and China, but also its global 5G efforts?
Well, I think if you're the U.S., you're concerned that if Huawei is the de facto leader in the world in 5G, that they're going to set the standards, and that could have an economic cost to U.S. companies. So I think that's where kind of the economic concern comes in. And I think on the national security side, you're worried if your allies actually are partnering and using 5G, that sensitive communications with them, that China could potentially have access to that. So I think again, that's how the two areas of both economics and national security kind of merge together there in Huawei.
Steve Pavlick from Renaissance Macro Research, thank you for joining us.
Sure, thank you.